Hey, I want to talk to you about creative lions. Well, this is just what I call them. I call them creative lions, but in reality, they're just creatives. But they aren't loud, and they don't dominate rooms. Creative lions, in my opinion, they're just wired differently. A creative lion is someone who really carries pressure internally. They push themselves harder than anyone ever would. They're obsessed with learning, improving, building, and leaving something meaningful behind. They're problem solvers, system thinkers, builders of ideas, brands, and movements. And when they are misunderstood or mishandled, they suffer greatly. But when they're coached well, they change everything. A creative lion is a high capacity creative who combines vision, discipline, and internal drive. They're not just artists. They're not just marketers. They're not just builders. They are creators with an ownership mentality. These are people that feel responsible for outcomes even when no one asks them to. They care deeply about quality, legacy, and impact. They see what could be, not just what is. Creative lions set very high expectations for themselves, often higher than leadership would. And because of that, they require leadership, not control. So how can you spot a creative lion in your company? Well, you can usually recognize a creative lion before they see it in themselves, because creative lions often are the ones that ask better questions than other people. They challenge assumptions without trying to be difficult. They see inefficiencies and just cannot ignore them. They get frustrated by busy work and meaningless processes. They care deeply about the work even when they're calm on the surface. They are not clock watchers. They're outcome driven. They will often outgrow the role before you actually see it. And if they disengage, it's rarely because of laziness. It's usually due to constraint. Creative lions do not thrive in cages. And this is where most leaders get it wrong. You do not micromanage a creative lion. You do not overprocess them. You do not treat them like a replaceable cog, because they're not. They do not need constant oversight. They do not need rigid scripts. They do not need permission for every move they make. If you try to cage a creative lion, they will either burn out or leave, and sometimes both, and that's going to kill a creative lion. Please don't do this, because you have something amazing, a part of your team, if you can handle it appropriately. Because creative lions need three things: clarity, ownership, and coaching. Give the creative lion on your team a clear outcome, not a step-by-step leash. Let them own the problem, not just a task. And then coach them through thinking, not compliance. They respond best to leadership that says, hey, here's the mission. Here's the standard. I trust you. Let's review and refine together. Creative lions want feedback. They want growth. They want responsibility that matches their capacity. They do not want to be micromanaged. They want to be developed. When you work with your creative lion in their development, you're going to be opening doors to opportunities beyond anything you could have imagined. This is where payoff happens. A creative lion doesn't just execute, they elevate. They build brands instead of just campaigns. They create systems instead of just one-off wins. They solve problems before they become expensive mistakes. They can turn chaos into structure, ideas into execution, vision into results. In the marketplace, creative lions become leaders, strategists, founders, builders of teams and movements. When aligned appropriately, they create an impact beyond anything imaginable. However, sometimes creative lions create friction, not by meaning to do it, not because they're difficult, and not because they want power, but because they think independently. And that independence can be or feel intimidating, especially to managers who are trained to lead through control instead of coaching. A creative lion asks questions. They see problems early. They challenge the process when it no longer serves the mission. To a secure leader, that's an asset. To an insecure one, well, that feels like a threat. Not because the creative lion is wrong, but because their thinking exposes the gaps in the systems, the gaps in the clarity, and the gaps in the leadership. And that tension is where most creative lions get mislabeled. Oh, that guy is difficult. Why is our marketing person being so defiant? This person is not a fit with our culture. In reality, they're revealing where leadership needs to grow. Creative lions are not fragile, but they are often misunderstood. They do not need to be tamed. They need to be trusted, challenged, and coached. And if you're a leader, your job is not to cage them. It's to point them in the right direction and get out of the way, because they're going to drive forward. They're going to run fast. They're going to attack. They're going to make the kill. They're going to make you proud. And if you're a creative lion watching this, I want you to know this. You're not too much. You're just built for more. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay.